May 9, 1941. 2:17 a.m. North Atlantic Ocean, west of Ireland. The sea is black. Not dark. Black. A convoy of slow merchant ships pushes west to the cold Atlantic swell, their engines throbbing beneath rusted steel decks. Salt spray lashes the bow of the freighter SS Oropesa as it fights the rolling waves. No lights burn. No voices rise above whispers. Even the cigarettes are hidden behind gloved hands. Somewhere out there, something is watching. On the bridge, Captain Edward Scott lifts his binoculars, scanning the horizon. The convoy stretches behind him like a nervous train of steel ghosts. Oil tankers, cargo freighters, grain ships, 20 vessels carrying everything Britain needs to survive. Food, fuel, steel. Without these convoys, the island starves. Without these convoys, the war is lost. A Royal Navy destroyer cuts across the dark water ahead, her wake glowing faintly in the moonless sea. HMS Bulldog, one of the convoy's escorts. Her crew listens carefully through headphones pressed against their ears. Hydrophones, listening for propellers beneath the ocean. The Atlantic has become a hunting ground, and the hunters are patient. 300 meters beneath the surface, a German-type IXB U-boat glides silently through the freezing water. Inside the steel cylinder, red lamps glow over sweating metal pipes. The air smells of oil, diesel fuel, and men who have not seen daylight in days. Oberleutnant Zur C. Fritz Julius Lemp stands beside the periscope. He is calm, too calm. He lowers the scope slowly, turning to his first officer. Convoy sighted. He says quietly. The words ripple through the submarine like electricity. Men move instantly. Torpedo crews check their weapons. Gyroscopes are adjusted. Depth settings confirmed. Electric motors hum softly as the U-boat shifts position beneath the convoy's path. Above them, unaware, 20 Allied ships plow forward into the trap. Lemp raises the periscope again. The crosshair settles on a fat tanker cutting through the waves. He exhales. Rohr eins, los. Tube 1 fire. A compressed burst of air launches a torpedo into the black water. Seconds later, another follows. Then another. 3 white trails streak silently through the ocean. On the SS Oropesa, a lookout suddenly freezes. He sees it. A faint line slicing toward the convoy. Torpedo starboard side. The shout explodes across the deck. But it is already too late. The first torpedo slams into a tanker midship. The explosion tears the vessel open like paper. Fire erupts instantly, oil spreading across the waves as burning debris rains into the sea. Men scream. Another torpedo hits a freighter farther down the convoy line. The blast throws sailors into the freezing Atlantic as steel plates buckle outward. The convoy dissolves into chaos. Signal lamps flash frantically. Destroyers accelerate. Depth charge crews sprint to their stations. Below the surface, inside U-110, Lemp watches to the periscope as the convoy burns. Another successful hunt. Another victory for the Kriegsmarine. For nearly 2 years now, Germany's U-boat fleet has ruled the Atlantic. Wolfpacks stalk the shipping lanes night after night, sinking Allied cargo faster than Britain can replace it. Each month the numbers grow worse. More ships lost, more sailors drowned, more supplies vanishing beneath the waves. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the German U-boat arm, believes the strategy is working perfectly. Star Britain, break the Atlantic lifeline, win the war without invading the island. And so far, nothing has stopped them. But tonight will not end the way Lemp expects, because the destroyers have already begun their counterattack. HMS Bulldog turns hard toward the last torpedo wake, her engines roaring as she charges forward. On her bridge, Lieutenant Commander Joe Baker grips the rail. Contact confirmed. The sonar operator shouts, "Bearing 180. Baker nods sharply. Depth charge is ready. Crewmen along the stern roll heavy cylindrical explosives into their launch racks. Each one is set to detonate deep beneath the ocean surface. The destroyer passes directly over the submerged U-boat. Inside U-110, the sonar operator stiffens. Destroyer overhead. Then the first depth charge detonates. The blast shakes the submarine violently. Light bulbs shatter. Instruments jump wildly. The hull groans like a living creature under pressure. Another explosion. Closer. Pipes burst. Water sprays across the control room. Men grab anything they can to stay standing. Lem's calm expression finally cracks. He knows what this means. The destroyer has their position, and if Bulldog continues the attack, the ocean itself will crush them. Dive deeper, he orders, but the sea is already closing in. Steel bends, rivets scream, and in that terrifying moment beneath the Atlantic, something unexpected begins to happen, because above them, aboard HMS Bulldog, Lieutenant Commander Baker has made a decision that will change the entire war at sea. He doesn't want the submarine destroyed. He wants it captured, alive. And hidden inside that damaged U-boat is something Germany believes absolutely impossible for the Allies to obtain. A machine, a code, a secret that could shatter the illusion of German invincibility. But first, they have to board a sinking enemy submarine in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And time is running out. May 9th, 1941. 2:46 a.m. North Atlantic Ocean. The destroyer HMS Bulldog circles slowly through the black Atlantic swell. Searchlights remain dark. Engines idle low. No one aboard the ship speaks above a whisper, because directly ahead of them, something impossible has just surfaced. The German submarine U-110 breaks through the water like a wounded animal. Its steel hull lifts heavily to port, seawater spilling across the conning tower. Diesel fumes drift across the surface as the crippled vessel rocks helplessly in the waves. Inside the submarine, panic spreads. Oberleutnant Fritz Julius Lemp knows the situation instantly. The depth charges have damaged the boat badly. Electrical systems are failing. Ballast tanks are flooding. And worst of all, the destroyer is still overhead. There's only one option left. Allemand verlassen das Boot. Abandon ship. The order moves through the submarine in seconds. Crewmen scramble toward the narrow ladder leading to the hatch. One after another, they climb into the cold Atlantic air, diving into the water beside their dying vessel. The sea swallows them instantly. Lemp emerges last. For a moment, he stands on the conning tower, staring across the dark ocean at the shadow of HMS Bulldog, only a few hundred meters away. Then he disappears into the water. Within minutes, the submarine is empty. The destroyer's bridge watches silently through binoculars. Lieutenant Commander Joe Baker lowers the glasses slowly. He cannot believe what he is seeing. A German U-boat floating abandoned and still intact. For a few seconds, the bridge crew simply stares. Then Baker turns sharply. Boarding party. The words freeze everyone in place. Board a German submarine? In the middle of the Atlantic? The risks are enormous. The submarine could sink at any moment. The Germans may have rigged demolition charges inside. And if enemy aircraft or another U-boat appears, the boarding team will be completely exposed. But Baker understands something critical. If the submarine is still afloat, then something inside it may still be intact. Something valuable. He makes a decision instantly. Launch the whaler. Sailors rush to the side of the destroyer, where a small wooden boat hangs from davits. Ropes creak as the craft lowers toward the churning sea. The boarding team climbs in quickly. Sub-Lieutenant David Baum leads the group, young, determined, and suddenly responsible for one of the most dangerous assignments of the war. As the boat drops into the water, the waves slam against its wooden sides. Ahead of them, U-110 looms like a dark mountain. Silent, abandoned, Baum grips the rope ladder hanging from the submarine's hull. Up we go, he mutters. One by one, the sailors climb aboard the enemy vessel. Their boots hit the wet steel deck. No gunfire, no movement, just wind and waves. Baum moves toward the open hatch. He pauses. Every man on the team knows what could be waiting below. Booby traps, explosives, flooding compartments. But the mission leaves no time for hesitation. He climbs down into the submarine. The interior is dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Water pools across the metal floor plates. Pipes drip steadily from the earlier depth charge damage. The air smells thick with diesel fuel and sweat. But the boat is empty, completely empty. Baum moves cautiously through the control room. Charts are still spread across the navigation table. Headphones lie abandoned beside the sonar equipment. Coffee cups roll across the floor as the submarine rocks with the swell. It feels as if the crew vanished seconds ago. Then one of the sailors calls out from the radio compartment. "Sir, you need to see this." Baum steps inside. Mounted against the wall sits a complicated machine made of rotors, wires, and metal cylinders. It looks almost harmless, like an oversized typewriter. But Baum has heard whispers about devices like this. German cipher machines, the legendary Enigma. Next to it sit codebooks, signal charts, encrypted message logs, documents the German Navy believed would never fall into enemy hands. Baum stares at them in disbelief. If these materials reach British intelligence, they could reveal how the Kriegsmarine communicates with its U-boat fleets across the Atlantic. They could expose Wolfpack locations, convoy attack plans, radio procedures, everything. But there is a problem. The submarine is slowly sinking. Water is already rising in the engine compartments. Baum turns to his men. "Take everything." The sailors begin grabbing books, papers, signal manuals, anything they can carry. Two men carefully remove the Enigma machine from its mounting. It is heavier than it looks, and the submarine is settling lower in the water with every passing minute. Above them on HMS Bulldog, Lieutenant Commander Baker watches the boarding team through binoculars. Time is slipping away. Then the signal comes. A flashlight beam flashing from the conning tower. Recover materials. The destroyer immediately launches another boat to collect the captured documents and equipment. One by one, the sailors return with armfuls of codebooks, signal charts, cipher tables, and finally, the machine itself, an intact Kriegsmarine Enigma. No Allied force has ever captured one from a submarine before. Not like this. Not with its codebooks still aboard. As the last man climbs back into the whaler, the sea finally claims you. 110. The submarine slowly tilts forward, then slips beneath the Atlantic waves forever. Gone. But the secrets taken from its control room are already heading toward Britain, and soon they will arrive at a quiet estate north of London, a place filled not with soldiers, but mathematicians. Because hidden behind barbed wire and secrecy lies the only group in the world capable of unlocking what those sailors just recovered, Bletchley Park. And inside one of its drafty huts works a brilliant, socially awkward mathematician who sees patterns where others see chaos. His name is Alan Turing, and the machine now sitting in a crate aboard HMS Bulldog is exactly what he's been waiting for. May 12, 1941, 9:10 a.m. Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, England. Rain taps steadily against the windows of Hut 8. Inside, the room smells of damp wool, cigarette smoke, and overheated electrical equipment. Desks overflow with paper. Chalkboards are crowded with strange symbols, cipher alphabets, and mathematical equations that twist across the walls like tangled wire. In the middle of the chaos sits a tall, thin man with dark hair and tired eyes. Dr. Alan Turing barely notices the noise around him. His attention is fixed on a page filled with meaningless letters. At least, that is how they appear to everyone else. QGXVN, RDLKP GASMI, HDZQW. To most people, it might as well be nonsense. But Turing knows better. Every letter in that message means something. Somewhere out in the Atlantic, a German U-boat commander has transmitted orders or coordinates using the Kriegsmarine Enigma cipher. The message has traveled through the air as radio waves, intercepted by Allied listening stations scattered along the British coast. The signals were recorded, copied, and delivered here, to Hut 8. The problem is simple in theory. Decode the message. The problem in reality is terrifyingly complex. The German Enigma machine scrambles messages using rotating cipher wheels called rotors. Each key press changes a wiring path inside the machine, transforming a single letter into another letter. But the real difficulty lies in the scale. With 3 rotors, plug board settings, and daily key changes, the machine can generate more than 150 quintillion possible combinations. That number is so large it might as well be infinity. If a human tried every possibility by hand, it would take longer than the entire length of the war. The German Navy knows this. That is why Admiral Karl Donitz trusts the system completely. His U-boat fleet depends on Enigma. every order, every patrol zone, every Wolfpack formation, all transmitted through those coded messages. And Donuts believes the Allies will never break it. But sitting in Hut 8, Alan Turing quietly disagrees. A courier bursts through the door, carrying a seal crate. The room falls silent. Everyone knows what it contains. The materials recovered from you. 110. Baum's boarding party risked their lives to bring them here. Codebooks, cipher tables, operational logs, and the machine itself. 2 naval officers carefully lift the Enigma device onto a workbench. It looks surprisingly ordinary. A wooden box with a keyboard and a row of rotating alphabet wheels. But the room feels different now, because this machine is the key. Turing stands slowly and walks toward it. He studies the rotors, the plug board, the wiring layout. Every detail matters. Nearby, mathematician Hugh Alexander watches silently. "Will it help?" he asks. Turing does not answer immediately. Instead, he opens the lid of the machine and presses a key. The rotors spin with a soft mechanical click. The letter lamp lights up. Turing smiles slightly. "It might," he says, "but there is still a problem. Capturing the Enigma machine does not mean the code is solved. The Germans change their encryption settings every single day. New rotor orders, new plug board wiring, new starting positions. Even with the machine itself, every message still requires finding the exact configuration used that day. Without that key, the message remains gibberish. This is where Turing's real weapon comes in. He calls it the bomb. Across another room in Bletchley Park stands a towering electrical device built from rows of spinning drums and tangled wiring. It looks less like a computer and more like an industrial engine, but its purpose is revolutionary. The bomb does not try every possible combination one by one. Instead, it searches for logical contradictions in the cipher. By exploiting predictable patterns in German communication, the machine can eliminate thousands of impossible settings in seconds. With enough intercepted messages and enough machines running simultaneously, the bomb can eventually narrow the possibilities down to the correct Enigma key. If it works, the captured documents from you, 110, provides something crucial. Insight into how the Kriegsmarine operators actually use their machines. Message formats, call signs, routine phrases, tiny habits that German radio operators repeat without realizing it. Those habits create cracks in the encryption, and Turing knows how to exploit cracks. For the next several days, Hut 8 barely sleeps. Mathematicians, linguists, and chess champions work around the clock analyzing the captured materials. Intercept operators deliver new encrypted messages hourly. The bombs spin endlessly, clicking, whirring, searching through millions of possibilities. Outside the park, the war continues exactly as before. Convoys still sail across the Atlantic. U-boats still hunt them. Ships still sink. Sailors still drown. Because until Hut 8 succeeds, the Allies remain blind. Then, late one evening, something happens. One of the bombs stops. Not because it failed, because it found something. A possible key. Operators rush the information into Hut 8. Turing studies the results carefully. Then he sits down at the captured Enigma machine. He sets the rotors, adjusts the plug board, types the first encrypted message. The machine clacks softly. A new line of letters appears. This time, they form words. German words. Real ones. Coordinates. Orders. Wolfpack deployment zones. For the first time in the war, the Allied codebreakers are reading Kriegsmarine naval communications. Not guesses. Not fragments. Actual messages. Turing leans back in his chair. The room is silent, because everyone understands what just happened. The U-boats have not lost their strength. They have not lost their ships. They have not lost their commanders. But they have just lost something far more dangerous. Their secrecy. And somewhere out in the Atlantic tonight, dozens of German submarines are transmitting messages they believe are perfectly secure. Messages that Hut 8 can now read. Which means the hunters of the Atlantic are no longer the only ones hunting. February 1942, North Atlantic Convoy Route HX 191. Gray dawn bled slowly across the horizon as Convoy HX 191 plowed westward toward the safety of Canada. 34 merchant ships moved in tight formation, their decks heavy with tanks, aircraft parts, food, and fuel. Everything the Allied war effort needed. Around them, the escort screen held its silent vigil. A Flower-class corvette, HMS Snowberry, cut through the cold Atlantic swells. Her sonar operators listened through headphones, their faces tense beneath dim red lights. For months, these convoys had been easy prey. German Kriegsmarine U-boats had stalked them like wolves. Coordinated attacks. Torpedoes striking from darkness. Merchant ships exploding into pillars of flame. But this convoy was different. Unseen by the sailors on deck, a new kind of weapon was guiding them. Intelligence. Far away in Bletchley Park, analysts had intercepted German signals hours earlier. The Enigma messages revealed a patrol grid of U-boat Group Westwall, commanded by Admiral Karl Donitz. For the first time, the Allies knew where the wolves were waiting. In London. The information had been relayed quietly to the Royal Navy's Western Approaches Command in Liverpool. A simple instruction followed. Alter course. Convoy HX 191 shifted 10 degrees north during the night. Just enough. Hundreds of miles away, beneath the cold Atlantic surface, U-boat U-432 waited in silence. Inside the steel hull, the crew moved carefully through the narrow corridors. Diesel fumes clung to the air. Captain Lieutenant Heinz Otto Schulze studied his chart table. His orders were clear. Intercept the convoy. For weeks, Enigma-coded signals had directed his submarine to this exact grid square. According to German intelligence, a convoy would pass directly through this corridor. He trusted the system completely. The Kriegsmarine believed Enigma was unbreakable. Schulze checked the periscope again. Nothing. No smoke. No silhouettes. Only empty sea. He frowned. Hours passed. Still nothing. In another U-boat, U-553, its commander, Captain Lieutenant Karl Thurman, waited with equal patience. His hydrophone operator listened intently. The faint throb of propellers usually carried far across the Atlantic. Merchant convoys were noisy, easy to detect. But today, the ocean was silent. Meanwhile, HX 191 moved safely through the northern corridor. On the bridge of HMS Snowberry, Lieutenant Commander Robert Winnie studied the horizon through binoculars. He had no idea that a team of mathematicians in Buckinghamshire had just saved his convoy. To him, the quiet sea felt strange, almost unnatural. Convoys rarely cross the Atlantic without attack anymore. Yet hour after hour passed without a single torpedo wake. Below deck, sailors relaxed slightly. Some even dared to believe they might cross the ocean untouched. Back in Germany, Admiral Donitz reviewed incoming reports from his U-boats. No contacts. No convoys. His brow tightened. That was impossible. His Wolfpacks had been positioned perfectly across the convoy routes. If convoys were moving, they should have been detected. But they weren't. At Bletchley Park, Alan Turing stood beside a plotting board covered in naval maps. Colored pins marked convoy routes and U-boat patrol zones. One by one, analysts updated the board with fresh decrypts. The pattern was becoming clear. German submarines were searching empty water. Turing adjusted a marker slightly. The convoy had slipped through the gap. A small victory, but an important one. Still, the German submarines remained dangerous. Even with decrypted intelligence, the Atlantic was vast. A single U-boat could still stumble upon a convoy by chance. And when that happened, the results could be catastrophic. March 1942. Convoy SC 122 approached the North Atlantic's most dangerous waters. The escort commander studied the latest intelligence report. It contained something extraordinary. Precise locations of multiple U-boats, positions, headings, patrol zones, information that would have been impossible months earlier. Using these details, the convoy altered course repeatedly through the night, a slow, cautious dance. But the Atlantic was unpredictable. At 2:17 hours, a hydrophone operator aboard HMS Montbretia suddenly stiffened. He heard it, a distant engine pulse. Submarine. Moments later, a dark-shaped surface on the horizon. The Wolf had finally found them. and the hunters were about to strike back. 2:17 hours. North Atlantic, March 1942. Inside the Flower-class corvette HMS Montbretia, the hydrophone operator removed one earphone and spoke quietly but urgently. Contact. Bearing 085. Slow propellers. The words traveled instantly through the cramped control room. The escort commander reacted without hesitation. Action stations. Across the convoy, alarm bells rang. Searchlights remained dark. The Atlantic night concealed everything, friend and enemy alike. Waves rolled beneath the ships like black hills. On the surface, a shadow moved. U-boat U-553, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Carl Thurman, had finally located the convoy. Through the periscope, Thurman saw silhouettes stretching across the horizon, dozens of merchant ships, a perfect target. For years, German submarine commanders had dominated these encounters. The procedure was familiar. Track the convoy, report its position through Enigma encoded radio, and summon the Wolfpack. Then the coordinated attack would begin. But something unusual happened that night. Before Thurman could transmit his contact report, radar operators aboard the escort destroyer HMS Volunteer detected a faint return. The British had recently begun installing short-range Type 271 radar, capable of spotting surface submarines in darkness or fog. The radar operator spoke calmly. Small surface contact. Range for 1,000 yards. On the destroyer's bridge, the commander understood immediately. Submarine. He ordered a sharp turn toward the signal. Moments later, Thurman saw something that startled him. A warship was already heading directly toward a position. Impossible. Convoys usually remained unaware until the first torpedo struck. He lowered the periscope and ordered a crash dive. Alarm. Tauchen. Valves opened. Water rushed into ballast tanks. The submarine slipped beneath the surface as engines roared to full power. But the British destroyer had already locked onto the target. The sonar operators aboard HMS Volunteer tracked the underwater echo carefully. The rhythmic ping echoed through the steel hull. Contact holding steady, range decreasing. Depth charge crews moved quickly on the stern deck. Each cylindrical charge contained nearly 300 pounds of explosive, designed to detonate at a preset depth. The destroyer passed directly over the submerged submarine. Stand by. The charges rolled from their racks. Seconds later, the Atlantic exploded. Underwater shock waves slammed into U-553, rattling valves and gauges. Lights flickered as the submarine lurched violently. Inside the control room, Thurman gripped a railing. The British had found them far too quickly. Another series of explosions followed. More depth charges. Pipes burst. Electrical panels sparked. The pressure hull groaned under the stress. Thurman realized something troubling. The escorts were not searching randomly. They seemed to know exactly where his submarine was moving. Above the water, the destroyer continued its attack pattern with mechanical precision. Each sonar update allowed the crew to adjust the next depth charge spread. Meanwhile, other escorts joined the hunt. The corvette HMS Montbretia and the destroyer HMS Leamington closed in, creating a deadly circle around the submerged submarine. Hours earlier, intelligence from Bletchley Park had warned the convoy escorts that U-boats were operating in this sector. They had entered the region prepared. The Germans did not know that. Inside the submarine, damage reports arrived quickly. Battery compartments flooding, hydraulic leaks, air pressure dropping. Thurman faced a brutal decision: remain submerged and risk destruction, or surface and fight. He chose the only option left: surface. Compressed air blasted into ballast tanks, forcing water out. Slowly, the submarine rose toward the surface. At 3:14 hours, U-553 burst through the Atlantic waves. But 3 Allied warships were waiting. Searchlights snapped on simultaneously, flooding the submarine with blinding white light. Deck guns swung into position. Machine guns opened fire across the exposed conning tower. German sailors scrambled onto the deck, attempting to man their own anti-aircraft weapons. But the destroyer's guns fired first. Shells slammed into the submarine's hull. Within minutes, flames spread across the deck. Thurman ordered his crew to abandon ship. One by one, sailors jumped into the freezing Atlantic. The submarine slipped beneath the surface shortly afterward, disappearing into darkness. It was a small engagement, one U-boat lost, yet the significance reached far beyond that single battle. For the first time in the Battle of the Atlantic, the hunters had become the hunted, and deep inside Bletchley Park, the mathematicians studying Enigma messages were beginning to realize something extraordinary. Their secret war was starting to change the entire course of the Atlantic campaign. But the Germans were not blind. Soon, Admiral Karl Donitz would notice a disturbing pattern. His submarines were failing to find convoys, and when they did, the escort seemed ready. Something was wrong. Something impossible. Berlin, Kriegsmarine High Command. June 1942, 8:40 hours. The office was quiet except for the scratching of a pencil across a naval chart. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of Germany's U-boat arm, studied the Atlantic map spread across his desk. Hundreds of grid squares covered the ocean, each labeled with coded patrol zones used by the Kriegsmarine U-boat fleet. Tiny red pins marked the positions where his submarines reported sightings of Allied convoys. But lately, the map looked wrong. For nearly 2 years, the system had worked almost perfectly. U-boats positioned across the convoy lanes. One submarine detects a target. An Enigma-encoded radio signal calls in nearby boats. Within hours, a Wolfpack forms. Then the attack. Convoys burn. Ships sink. Germany tightens its grip around Britain's lifeline. But during the last few months, something had shifted. Reports arriving from the Atlantic told an unsettling story. Convoys were slipping through the patrol grids without being detected. Submarines waited for days in assigned sectors, only to watch empty ocean roll beneath their periscopes. Even worse, when a submarine finally made contact with a convoy, the escorts often reacted immediately, too quickly. Destroyers turned directly toward the submarine's position. Radar and sonar operators seemed prepared before the attack even began. Donitz tapped the pencil slowly against the table. His staff officers stood nearby in silence. Perhaps the British are improving their escort tactics, one officer suggested carefully. Donitz did not respond immediately. He had built the Wolfpack strategy personally. Every patrol grid, every communication procedure, every operational order passed through his headquarters. The system depended on 2 things: radio coordination and Enigma encryption. Without secure communication, the entire Wolfpack doctrine would collapse. But Enigma was supposed to be impossible to break. German cryptographers had explained the mathematics many times. Billions of combinations, daily key changes, plugboard wiring that altered the cipher further. Even if the enemy captured a machine, they would still face an impossible task trying to guess the daily settings. The Germans trusted Enigma completely, yet something continued to bother Donitz. He picked up one of the latest patrol reports. U-Boat U-584. Commander Captain Lieutenant Joachim Dieck had transmitted a contact report after spotting a convoy west of Iceland. Within hours, several submarines were moving toward the location. But before the attack could begin, the convoy abruptly changed course. Directly away from the Wolfpack. Not randomly, not slowly, but decisively, as if someone had warned them. Donitz set the paper down slowly. Could our signals be intercepted? Another officer asked. Yes, Donitz replied. Intercepted, yes. All navies intercepted radio traffic. That was nothing new. But interception alone meant nothing. Without the encryption key, the messages were useless. Donitz turned toward the large window overlooking Berlin's harbor. If they could read Enigma, he said quietly, our submarines would already be destroyed. The officers nodded. It was a logical conclusion. If the British truly understood German naval communications, they could direct aircraft and warships directly to every submarine patrol position. Losses would skyrocket overnight. But that had not happened. U-boats were still sinking ships. Convoys were still being attacked. The Atlantic War remained brutal. So Donitz dismissed the thought. For now. Meanwhile, across the North Atlantic, another convoy was beginning its journey. Convoy PQ-17, bound for Soviet Union to the dangerous Arctic route. carried tanks, trucks, aircraft, and ammunition desperately needed on the Eastern Front. The Germans were determined to destroy it. Multiple U-boats had been deployed along the route. Surface raiders and Luftwaffe bombers prepared to join the attack. Enigma signals transmitted the entire plan, from Berlin to the Arctic patrol zones. Every submarine received its instructions. What the Germans did not know was that far away in Bletchley Park, analysts in HUD 8 were already reading those transmissions. The orders, the positions, the timing, everything. Alan Turing and his team watched the plan unfold across their intelligence maps. They now knew exactly where the German submarines were waiting, but the decision about how to use that knowledge rested far above their level. In the offices of British Naval Command, a difficult question was forming. If the Allies used this information too openly, the Germans might realize Enigma had been compromised, and if that happened, they would change the system. The codebreakers' greatest advantage would vanish overnight. So the Allies faced a dangerous balance. Use the intelligence carefully, or risk losing it forever. And soon, that decision would lead to one of the most controversial moments of the entire Atlantic War. July 1942, Arctic Ocean north of Norway. Convoy PQ-17 moved slowly through the freezing gray waters between Iceland and the Soviet port of Arkhangelsk. 35 merchant ships struggled through fog and drifting ice, their hulls packed with war supplies. The cargo mattered enormously. Nearly 300 aircraft, hundreds of tanks, trucks, ammunition, and fuel destined for the Soviet Union, which was fighting desperately against the armies of Adolf Hitler on the Eastern Front. If the convoy reached Russia, it would strengthen Soviet defenses. If it did not, the supplies would sink into the Arctic depths. Escorting the convoy were several British destroyers, corvettes, and minesweepers. Farther away, a larger covering force waited in case German surface ships attempted an attack. But the Arctic route was unlike the Atlantic convoy lanes. Here, daylight lasted nearly 24 hours in summer. Darkness could not hide ships from aircraft or submarines. The sea was open and exposed. German forces stationed in occupied Norway were already preparing. Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft scanned the ocean constantly. U-boats moved into interception positions. Most concerning of all, the German battleship Tirpitz waited in the Norwegian fjords. The presence of Tirpitz terrified Allied naval commanders. She was one of the largest and most powerful battleships in the world. If she reached PQ-17, the convoy could be annihilated. Meanwhile, at Bletchley Park, analysts were reading German naval communications as they arrived. The Enigma decrypts revealed something important. German submarines and aircraft had indeed been ordered to converge on PQ-17. That was expected, but there was uncertainty about the battleship. Some intercepted signals suggested Tirpitz might sail to intercept the convoy. Others suggested she would remain in harbor. The information was incomplete. In London, the intelligence reports reached the Royal Navy command structure. Officers studied the decrypted signals and tried to interpret German intentions. The possibility of a battleship attack alarmed them. A convoy of slow merchant ships could not survive an engagement with a capital warship like Tirpitz. Even the escorting destroyers would be outmatched. After long debate, a decision was made. It would become one of the most controversial orders of the entire war. On July 4th, 1942, a signal was transmitted to the escort commander of PQ-17. The order was blunt. Convoy is to scatter. The merchant ships were instructed to break formation and sail independently toward the Soviet Union at maximum speed. At the same time, the escorting warships were ordered to withdraw westward to avoid the supposed threat of Tirpitz. When the message reached the convoy, confusion spread quickly. The escort commanders protested. Convoys existed precisely to avoid the situation. Merchant ships alone were easy prey for submarines and aircraft. But the order had come from high command, and it had to be obeyed. Within hours, the convoy dissolved. Ships turned in different directions across the Arctic Sea. Some headed north into the ice fields. Others attempted to race eastward toward Russia. Their escorts disappeared over the horizon. For the German forces hunting PQ-17, the scattered ships presented perfect targets. Over the next several days, Luftwaffe bombers and U-boats attacked repeatedly. Without coordinated defense, Merchant vessels were destroyed one by one. Explosions shattered the calm Arctic waters. Burning oil spread across the waves. Sailors struggled in the freezing sea, where survival time was measured in minutes. U-boats finished damaged ships with torpedoes. Aircraft returned again and again. When the disaster finally ended, the losses were catastrophic. Of the 35 merchant ships that began the voyage, 24 were sunk. Thousands of vehicles, tanks, aircraft, and supplies disappeared beneath the Arctic Ocean. The tragedy shocked Allied leadership. Even more troubling was a fact discovered later. The German battleship Tirpitz never actually attacked a convoy. She had remained in Norwegian waters the entire time. The decision to scatter PQ-17 had exposed the ships unnecessarily. At Bletchley Park, analysts studying Enigma messages quietly recognized something else. The decrypts had revealed many German submarine positions during the operation, but using that information openly to save every ship might have revealed the existence of the code-breaking effort. That intelligence source had a code name, Ultra. Protecting Ultra sometimes required painful choices. The men and women in the code-breaking huts understood the harsh calculation. Saving one convoy might expose the secret and cost many more lives later. The Atlantic War had become a contest not only of ships and weapons, but also of information, and the hidden battle over Enigma was only beginning to reach its full impact. Soon, new technology, longer-range aircraft, and improved radar would join the codebreakers' work. When those forces combined, the balance of the Battle of the Atlantic would finally begin to shift. But before that turning point arrived, the ocean would claim thousands more sailors. May 1943, North Atlantic convoy routes. The sea was still cold, still violent, still vast beyond imagination. But something fundamental had changed in the war beneath its waves. German U-boats were still there, still hunting, still transmitting Enigma signals through the darkness. But now the Atlantic was no longer their domain. At Bletchley Park, the analysts in Hut 8 worked with a confidence they had never known before. The Enigma traffic flowing from the Kriegsmarine was being decrypted faster and more consistently than at any point earlier in the war. New bomb machines, designed by the team led by Alan Turing, ran day and night. Metal drums rotated endlessly. Electrical circuits searched through thousands of possible Enigma settings. And increasingly they succeeded. Each successful decrypt revealed something invaluable. U-boat patrol grids, refueling rendezvous, attack orders from Karl Donitz himself. For Allied commanders directing convoys across the Atlantic, it was like suddenly seeing the battlefield from above. Instead of sailing blindly into danger, they could steer around it. Convoys shifted course quietly during the night. Merchant captains never knew why. Often, the Wolfpacks waited in empty water. But intelligence alone did not win the Atlantic. By 1943, several new technologies had joined the fight. Long-range B. 24 Liberator Patrol aircraft began flying from Iceland and Newfoundland, closing the dangerous mid-Atlantic gap, where convoys had previously traveled without air cover. Radar improved dramatically. Escort ships carried centimetric radar, capable of detecting the small silhouette of a surface submarine even in heavy weather or darkness. Then there was a weapon the Germans had never faced before, the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. Instead of dropping depth charges behind a ship, Hedgehog launched a spread of explosive projectiles ahead of the escort vessel. If they struck a submarine, they detonated instantly. No warning, no time to escape. Convoy escorts were becoming far more lethal. And in May 1943, everything collided at once. Several large convoys crossed the North Atlantic under heavy escort protection. At the same time, Donitz ordered dozens of U-boats into the convoy routes. The Germans expected another devastating series of attacks. Instead, they encountered a nightmare. Aircraft appeared suddenly over the horizon, forcing submarines to dive before they could attack. Destroyers hunted them relentlessly with sonar and Hedgehog mortars. And many of the convoys had already avoided the worst patrol zones thanks to Enigma decrypts. During that single month, the results shocked even Allied commanders. 43 German U-boats were destroyed in May 1943 alone. Submarines that had once dominated the Atlantic were now being hunted down faster than Germany could replace them. The losses devastated the U-boat arm. In Berlin, Karl Donitz reviewed the casualty reports arriving from the Atlantic. Page after page. Submarine after submarine lost. Entire crews gone. The Wolfpack strategy that had once seemed unstoppable was collapsing. Donitz finally made a decision he had resisted for months. He ordered the majority of German submarines withdrawn from the North Atlantic convoy routes. The order was brief, but its meaning was enormous. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous campaign of the Second World War, had reached its turning point. Convoys would still be attacked. Ships would still be lost. But Germany had lost the ability to sever Britain's lifeline across the ocean. Back at Bletchley Park, the mathematicians and linguists who had helped make that turning point possible returned quietly to their work. Their achievements remained secret. Most naval officers escorting convoys never knew the full story behind their sudden advantage. Even many Allied commanders were unaware of the details. The codebreaker success remained hidden behind the strict secrecy of ultra-intelligence. For Alan Turing and his colleagues, there would be no public recognition for decades. Yet their work had altered the course of the war. One machine, one code, one quiet breakthrough inside a British manor house. And slowly, silently, the tide of the Atlantic had turned.